The views and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, our panel will once again be answering questions from our listeners. Welcome, everyone. Today, Tony from St. Louis, Missouri, who asks, there are a number of different voting groups in the United States, age, gender, race, and so forth. Which does the panel think will be the most impactful in this year's election? And the second part of Tony's question is, which group might secure a Trump win or a Harris win?
Interesting question. Thank you for it.
Absolutely. That's a good question. You want to try it, Scott?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say that young people are the most important voting bloc. There are a lot of them. I don't have the stats in front of me or anything like that, but I know that this country has gotten a lot younger and that young people are a lot more vocal now, probably for the first time since the late 60s, early 70s, about politics. And they're extremely progressive. And I think that if they come out, which is always a question, right? Because the reputation that young people have is of impatience, and if there's a long line, they won't wait on it. And if they have something better to do that day, they won't go vote. If it rains, they're not bothering. So there's all kinds of questions like that. As a voting bloc is concerned, I think that young people are probably more powerful and more delineated than the other groups that we often think about, which would be Hispanics, which I don't think is even a thing anymore, right? I don't believe that there's a block of Hispanics. They're so different, so many different people who speak Spanish as a first or second language here. And Black voters, same thing. I think Black voters probably are more interested in economic issues, but that is no different from white voters. So why do we even talk about Black voters as a separate bloc? Because their concerns are our concerns as white people. So I think that that young people age is the biggest bloc that it will separate itself and vote, I believe, for Kamala Harris.
Scott brings up a very good point. Younger voters usually do not like standing in lines and waiting. They have better things to do. Thankfully, they now have cell phones. So, of course, they could be on social media while they're standing in line. It's not like, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s when you didn't have something to occupy yourself. Heck, they could be playing, Fortnite while they're standing there in line. So that might be an advantage. And I agree. The young voting bloc is hugely important. And not only for who wins this election, but also what the direction of the country is going to be. Even if Kamala Harris was to lose, if the young voting bloc votes in high numbers and a higher percentage for her, that gives us some hope for the future of the country. Because as Scott said, they are more progressive. They are more diverse. They accept diversity far better than older generations do. And I think that that's an important block and something we can take and say, okay, maybe their impact wasn't as great this time around, but that's what the future of the country looks like. And eventually all these old people that voted for Trump or, have these old conservative ideas and they're not even conservative ideas anymore. They're truly not. They'll die out. And it's you're leaving it to this group who recognized misogyny, who recognized that Trump was not somebody that they could support because of his actions. And I think that's regardless of the election result, that's something we could take away from this. Another important voting group, and I think sometimes they see this group as a one issue group. I think is women. We have to remember women outnumber men. They are a huge voting group. And we are now in a society where women don't just automatically vote the way the men are voting. They have their own mind. I know that I could not tell my wife how to vote. I know how she's going to vote because she's a progressive. But I mean, if she was a diehard Trumper, there's no way I could change her mind. And I think that that's an important thing. Women have put themselves out forward as independent of their male partners. And I think that's a very important aspect for that voting group, especially as large as it is. And I'm sorry, I know you hear an awful lot about it in the media. I don't think, I truly do not think that abortion is their only issue. Women now control more of the money in families. Women are the ones that go to the grocery store. Women are the ones that have to deal with a lot of this, the child care. They always have. And I think that's what made them independent, because their husband may vote one way or their partner might vote one way, but it may not address the needs of what the woman in the family unit believes is necessary to be addressed. That made them become more independent. And that's why I think that women will be extremely important, along with young people, as far as this election is concerned. Black voters, I agree with Scott. They have the same concerns that white voters have. And blacks generally vote Democratic. That's kind of the trend that it goes on to. And I have to ask myself, why is that? If there's the same issues as white voters, why do they vote totally opposite all the time? And I think that black voters actually pay very much attention to those social issues that they think that the candidate is going to be more willing to address. And that's why they vote for Democrats, because they see Democrats dealing with the social issues, even beyond the economics and all the rest of it, where white voters don't want anybody to deal with those, what they see as perceived social issues. And I think that's where it begins to diverge. Yes, they have the same concerns. Yes, they have this, economics and all that stuff. But I think black voters vote more on ideology of the social issues than white voters do. And I think that's why we see the disparity there and who votes for what.
And I agree. And I just wanted to bring up one other distinction. I do think that there is a difference between young people in gender, because there is a bit of a divide there. But I think that Kamala Harris has diffused a lot of that. And what I mean by that is, I think that young men were more leaning toward Trump when Joe Biden was his opponent, because they looked at Trump as stronger and more assertive. And those seem to be values traits that they value. And I don't think that they're on the same footing right now as far as Kamala Harris is concerned. You hear more about, I would like to know more about Kamala Harris. I don't know her well enough. And I don't think that matters as much to young people who I think are voting for age, right? They're tired of these old men. And I also think that they're looking at the future, or at least they should be. And if I was Kamala Harris, I would definitely start emphasizing the fact that the investments that are being made right now are going to benefit them 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And that Trump would probably reverse a lot of those investments. And those investments are not yet paying dividends, right? A lot of factories are still being built that got money from the IRA or the CHIPS Act or the infrastructure law. Clean energy investment has gone up by 7.5% already, up from, I think it's 40 billion, up from 16 billion in 2021. That's a pretty big jump. Investment in energy technology like carbon capture and storage and hydrogen power jumped by 1,000% over the last year or so. So, manufacturing for EV batteries is up 200%. These investments are going to pay off, and they're going to pay off in a big way for this generation that's beginning to vote now. and hopefully they see that and are not as short-sighted as many older people seem to be.
Right, right, and I totally agree. Older people, in their 60s, the farthest they look is 5 years from now. Now they may live longer, of course. There's no guarantee of anything, but that's basically what they look at. They look at a lot about what's going on today. How is today affecting me? That's really all I care about. Young people, they're somebody that's 20, they're looking what's this going to look like 60 years from now? What's this going to like 50 years from now? And I think that really, once again, like when I was saying about the black voting bloc, they look to ideology. They look to not just today and what's in it for me, which a lot of the older generation really looks at it as, and many times when they look at it, they're looking at it from the wrong perspective because they vote against their own interests. But the young voters really are looking at, what does this look like, 25 years down the road when all those old voters are gone? And that's an important distinction to be made.
Yeah, and Brooke, what's your gut reaction to hearing somebody who's a adjudicated rapist saying that he's going to take care of women, and that you're not going to think about abortion anymore? I think these terms that Trump used in that speech the other day are, if they were meant to placate women who were on the fence about him, I think they did exactly the opposite of that.
What he said, women don't need taking care of, being taken care of. What women need is to have their rights and their freedoms restored, because those were, unjustly and unfairly taken away. And now Trump is going to take care of the women of this country? Please. Trump can't even take care of his own family, his own wives. And the way he has treated women and talked about women in the past, I found it sickening. One Republican senator, I forget the guy's name, was saying that women who can no longer have children shouldn't be worried or shouldn't have an opinion on abortion or something like that because they can't have children. By his own logic, then, if I, who can no longer have children, should not have any thoughts or feelings about pregnancy termination, then neither should he, neither should Trump, neither should Vance, neither should any man on the Supreme Court, neither should any man in Congress.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was a little surprised to read about these women that are dying after having miscarriages, and the entire fetus is not naturally exiting their bodies, and they need a abortion basically to not terminate a pregnancy because the pregnancy is terminated, but to, I guess, clean it out or remove what's left from her, which is dangerous, and they can't get help. And I was looking into, miscarriages in America, and apparently miscarriages in America are more poorly understood than miscarriages in Europe because of this religious standpoint that we seem to have, where we don't want to talk about these issues. They don't get reported. They are not aggregated. There's no data that scientists can study to understand why women miscarriage, what effect it has on them, what effect it has on the family, and so on. And it's just astounding to me that this is like an issue that everybody wants to have hands off on when it comes to the benefits for women, but they have no compunction at all about saying you should do this, you should do that, you should not do this, and it's criminal if you do it. It's one of those symptoms of an insane society, and probably a misogynistic society that we live in right now.
The ignorance as well is appalling.
Yeah, it seems so.
Such an advanced country. We thank you for your question, Tony, and we hope to see you again next time.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, who is our editing partner, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. We'd also like to thank iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.